Okay, so get this picture in your mind, right? It's England, 12th century. A village called Woolpit, named for its wolf pits. Harvest time. Everything's pretty normal, you know? Sun shining, farmers working, and then suddenly, bam!
Hmm.
Two kids just appear out of nowhere.
Out of
Well,
nowhere.
seemingly out of nowhere. But here's the catch. They're green.
Green.
Yeah, green as emeralds. And to make things even weirder, they're speaking some language no one understands.
Wow. That's, so just a local legend then?
Not even close. We've got actual written accounts from respected historians, which makes this whole thing even more mind-boggling. We're talking about the Green Children of Woolpit.
Ah, I've heard of this. Never really looked into it, though. Sounds fascinating.
It is fascinating. That's where we're doing a deep dive on it, right? We're going to be examining these historical accounts, trying to figure out where the facts end and the fiction begins. And hopefully along the way, we'll learn a little something about history, folklore, and how a good story can stick around for centuries.
Sounds like a plan. So where do we start?
Well, we've got to start with the sources. We've got two main ones. One is Historia Rerum Anglicarum by William of Newburgh. He wrote that about 40 years after it supposedly happened, based on interviews with a bunch of locals.
Okay, so relatively soon after the events, any idea if he actually met these green children?
Doesn't seem like it from his writing. But the other source, that's Chronicon Anglicanum by Ralph of Coggeshall, was also written a few decades later, but he claims his account is based on first-hand info from Sir Richard de Calne. This de Calne guy supposedly took the children in.
Ooh, first-hand account.
Yeah.
That sounds promising.
Yeah, could be. But, you know, it's always good to be a little skeptical, especially when someone's claiming a close connection to something this extraordinary.
Right. People tend to embellish their role in a good story sometimes.
Exactly. But before we go full conspiracy theorist on this de Calne character, let's lay down the basics, the stuff both these chroniclers agree on. What's the core story here?
So both accounts talk about these two kids, a boy and a girl, found near a wolf pit, obviously, in a Woolpit. They had green skin, weird clothes, and spoke gibberish, at least to the villagers.
So they try to feed these kids, right?
Of course, who wouldn't? But the kids refused everything.
Picky eaters, huh?
Until someone offered them beanstalks. And then they lived on beans for a good while.
Beans. Interesting. Okay, so then what?
Tragically, the boy died soon after being baptized. But the girl, she pulled through.
And the green skin.
Faded away. She learned English, even married a local guy, became a regular wool pitter.
A true success story. So she just decided to settle down and live a normal life after that. No clues as to where she came from.
Well, she did have an explanation, and this is where it gets really wild. She claimed to have come from a land with no sun, called it St. Martin's Land, said everyone there was green and they lived in, like, perpetual twilight.
Some kind of gloomy?
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, she said they were tending flocks, heard some bells, got entranced somehow, and next thing they knew, bam, wool pit.
That's where the real head-scratching starts.
Yep. Sounds like something straight out of a fairy tale. But let's not get carried away just yet. Before we go down that rabbit hole, we should talk about the differences between these two accounts. What are some of the things that don't quite add up?
Yeah, good point. We need to stay grounded here. So what jumps out at you?
Well, this Sir Richard de Calne, the guy Ralph says took them in. William, even though he talked to tons of people, he never mentions him. Makes you wonder about Ralph's source, right? Like, was this the Calne guy just trying to make himself sound more important than he was?
Yeah, maybe a bit of a braggart, inflating his role in this whole thing. Anything else?
Even where the girl ended up marrying is different. William says Lena, Ralph says Lynn. Two different places. Makes you wonder if they're even talking about the same girl.
Huh, so we've got a potential braggart and now some geographical confusion.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
How they got to Woolpit is different, too. William's they heard bells while tending flocks. But Ralph says they followed flocks into a cavern, then heard bells, like a game of telephone gone wrong.
Oh, that's a good analogy. Details changing with every retelling. Which reminds me, what about that supposed third account by Gervase of Tilbury? Does that clear anything up?
Nah, not really. Turns out that's based on a much later book, and it's basically just a rehash of what William and Ralph already said.
So we're back to our two main guys, each with their own set of quirks and question marks.
Looks like it.
All right, so two sources, two different perspectives on this historical head-scratcher. But let's get to the heart of it, right? Who were these green kids, and where did they come from? I mean, the theories range from totally out there to, well, maybe kind of plausible.
Yeah, there are definitely some wild ones out there. Some folks lean towards the supernatural, fairies, visitors from another dimension, beings from some hidden world, you name it.
Like St. Martin's Land does sound a bit otherworldly, a place with no sun and constant twilight. Kind of a classic fairyland vibe, wouldn't you say?
It does, doesn't it? But you gotta remember, back in 12th century England, belief in fairies was pretty common, and they weren't seen as, cute and cuddly little creatures flitting around sprinkling pixie dust.
Oh, yeah. The fairies back then were a bit more intense, weren't they? A little less Tinkerbell, a little more creepy.
Exactly. Powerful beings from another realm, connected to ours, but also hidden and mysterious
Yeah.
and potentially dangerous.
So bumping into fairies wasn't exactly a fun little adventure. It was a real risk. You get lost, trapped in their realm. Who knows what else? Not exactly a Disney movie, huh?
Not at all. So you can see why people back then might have thought these green children were like fairy changelings or something. Kids who'd somehow wandered into our world from theirs.
That's a creepy thought. Gives me chills just thinking about it. Any other supernatural explanations people have come up with over the years?
Well, you've got the alien theory, of course, visitors from another planet. But that's a pretty modern interpretation. The original accounts don't say anything about spaceships or laser beams or any of that.
Yeah, no flying saucers in 12th century England. But I guess it makes sense that we try to fit these old mysteries into our modern understanding of the world, right? Aliens are kind of our go-to explanation for the unexplainable these days.
It's true. But before we get too lost in the realm of the supernatural, maybe we should consider some of the more rational explanations for the green children. There are some pretty interesting theories out there that try to explain their appearance in a more grounded way.
Yeah, let's bring it back down to earth for a minute. What does Team Rational have to say about all this?
One theory is that they were just lost or abandoned kids from a nearby village, maybe Fordham St. Martin, the one with those flint mines. It's not hard to imagine kids wandering off, getting disoriented in those tunnels, and coming out sounding like they're speaking a foreign language.
Makes sense. Kids getting lost in mines, speech sounding different. Yeah, I can see that. But what about the green skin? How does that fit into the whole lost kids in the mines theory?
Well, some folks point to this condition called green chlorosis. It's a type of anemia that can cause a greenish pallor. They say maybe the girl's skin going back to normal after eating beans means her diet got better and she wasn't deficient anymore.
Anemia, huh? For those of us who might not be doctors, can you explain what that is and how it might be related to diet and environment?
Sure. Anemia is basically when your body doesn't have enough healthy red blood cells to carry oxygen around. This can make you tired, weak, pale, and in some cases, yeah, even give your skin a greenish tint. What you eat and where you live can play a big role, especially if you're not getting enough iron.
So if these kids were anemic because they weren't eating right, then suddenly they're getting all these beans, which are a good source of iron. That could explain why their skin color changed. A pretty solid theory, but I remember you saying that even this seemingly straightforward explanation has some holes.
It does. I mean, green chlorosis exists, sure, but it's not exactly common. It's kind of strange that both kids would have it so severely. And you'd think other people in the area would be affected too, right? These kids weren't just a little pale, they were described as bright green.
That's true. It's a detail that even the most rational explanation struggles to fully account for. And then there's the big one, the question that always pops up. Why make up this whole elaborate story about a land with no sun if they were just lost kids? Wouldn't they just say, hey, we got lost?
Yeah, that's the thing. The St. Martin's Land story adds a whole other layer to this whole mystery. It suggests there was more going on than just simple confusion or disorientation. Maybe the kids were traumatized, alone, and they created this narrative to cope, to create a sense of belonging or even to protect themselves.
Almost like they were building a wall, keeping people at a distance. So we've got the supernatural explanations, the rational theories, and yet none of them really fully satisfy. It's like we're missing a piece of the puzzle.
We might be looking at this the wrong way. What if it's not about where they came from, but about what their appearance meant to the people who found them? What if the key to understanding this whole thing lies in the cultural and historical context of 12th century England?
You're talking about the bigger picture, the world these kids stumbled into. And it was a world in flux, right? The Norman conquest had just happened a few generations earlier. Two different cultures trying to merge, different languages, different beliefs.
Exactly. Imagine the anxieties, the uncertainties of that time. Then suddenly you've got these green kids speaking gibberish. It's easy to see how that could be interpreted as a sign, an omen, maybe even a threat.
Especially in a world where people believed in fairies, demons, all sorts of supernatural beings. Their greenness, their otherness could have been terrifying.
Absolutely.
So maybe this story isn't about finding a definitive answer to the question, where did they come from? Maybe it's about exploring how their appearance reflects the fears, the hopes, the entire worldview of the people who found them.
It's about understanding the story through the lens of their time, not ours.
And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What stories do we tell today that reflect our own anxieties and hopes? What do our modern-day mysteries reveal about us?
It's a good question to think about. The Green Children of Woolpit, they might be a mystery from the past, but their story still speaks to us today in ways we're only beginning to understand.
And that's something we'll delve into even further in the next part of our deep dive. We'll be exploring the lasting impact of this story, how it's evolved in folklore and pop culture, and what it might be telling us about ourselves, right here in the 21st century. But for now, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back to continue our journey into the strange and captivating world of the Green Children of Woolpit.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the mystery of the Green Children of Woolpit. Last time we were talking about the main facts, and those weird little inconsistencies between William of Newburgh's account and Ralph of Coggeshall's.
Yeah, that Sir Richard de Cal guy, possibly exaggerating his role.
Mm.
And then there's the whole different towns for the girls' marriage thing. It's like every time we peel back a layer, there's another question underneath.
Exactly. It's what makes this story so darn intriguing, right? A puzzle with some pieces missing. We got to fill in the blanks ourselves.
Speaking of filling in blanks, last time we were getting into the whole range of theories about where these kids came from. Everything from fairies to, well, maybe they were just lost.
Right. We had Team Supernatural and Team Rational. Let's dig a little deeper into each of those, starting with the more out there explanations. The fairy theory, that's been around for ages. It's kind of hard to resist, isn't it? Green skin, strange clothes, won't eat normal food. Sounds like fairies, right?
And then there's that St. Martin's Land place. No sun, constant twilight, totally fits the classic fairy realm description.
Yeah.
But back in 12th century England, I'm guessing a fairy encounter wasn't seen as something cute and fun.
Oh, definitely not. Back then, people really believed in fairies, but they weren't the friendly, helpful type. More like powerful beings from another world, connected to ours, but also kind of scary and unpredictable.
So not like a visit from Tinkerbell, more like stepping into a place where anything could happen, and not necessarily good things.
Exactly. You could get lost, trapped, who knows? So it's understandable that folks back then might have thought, hey, maybe these green kids are fairy changelings.
That's kind of freaky when you think about it. Swapping human kids for fairy kids. Were there any other supernatural theories floating around?
Oh, yeah, the alien theory popped up eventually. But that's definitely a modern take on it. William and Ralph, they didn't mention spaceships or anything like that.
No UFO sightings in 12th century England. Figures. But it is funny how we try to explain old mysteries using our modern ideas, isn't it?
Yeah,
Aliens are kind of our go-to explanation for weird stuff these days.
that's true. But maybe we should give Team Rational a chance to make their case. There are some pretty down-to-earth theories about the Green Children that are worth considering.
Okay, let's hear them. What's the most logical explanation for all this?
Well, one theory is that the kids were just lost. Maybe from that village with the flint mines, Fordham St. Martin. Kids wander off, get turned around in those tunnels, come out sounding like they're speaking a different language.
Lost in the mines? Yeah, I can see that happening. But the green skin, how do they explain that?
Some people think it could have been a condition called green chlorosis, which is a type of anemia. It can make your skin look kind of greenish. Their idea is that maybe the girl started eating better when she was in Woolpit, got more iron in her diet, and that's why her skin went back to normal.
Okay, hold on, back up a sec. Anemia. What exactly is that? I'm no doctor, so break it down for me.
Sure. Basically, it means your blood isn't carrying enough oxygen around your body. You can get tired, weak, pale. And yeah, sometimes your skin can even take on a greenish tinge. It often happens if you're not getting the right nutrients, like iron.
So if those kids were anemic because they weren't eating right, and then suddenly they're in Woolpit eating beans which have iron, yeah, their skin color could change. Makes sense to me. But you said earlier that this theory has some problems. What doesn't quite fit?
Well, it's pretty rare for two kids to have green chlorosis that badly. And if it was an environmental thing or a diet thing in that area, wouldn't other people be green too? These kids were described as bright green, not just a little pale.
Yeah, good point. And it still doesn't explain the St. Martin's Land story, does it? If they were just lost, why make up a whole fantasy world?
Right. That's the thing that really makes you think. There's got to be more to it than just being lost and confused. Maybe they were traumatized, scared. Maybe that story was their way of coping, of creating a world they belonged to, even if it wasn't real.
Or even a way to protect themselves, to avoid questions they didn't want to answer. So we've got supernatural theories, rational theories, and none of them really hit the nail on the head. It's like we're missing something crucial here.
We might be asking the wrong questions. What if it's not about where they came from, but about what their arrival meant to the people of Woolpit? What if we need to look at this through the lens of 12th century England to really understand it?
You're talking about the bigger picture, the historical context. And England back then was a pretty wild place, right? The Norman conquest had just shaken everything up. You had two different cultures trying to blend together, two different languages. There's been a lot of tension, a lot of uncertainty.
Imagine that, and then suddenly these green kids show up speaking gibberish. It's like something out of a nightmare, right?
Totally. Especially for people who believed in all sorts of supernatural stuff. Fairies, demons, you name it. These kids, with their green skin, their otherness, it's easy to see how that could be interpreted as a sign of something bad.
Yeah, like an omen, a warning, or maybe even something demonic.
So maybe we're focusing too much on solving the mystery of where they came from. Maybe the real point is to understand how their appearance was perceived by the people who found them. To see this story as a reflection of their anxieties, their fears, their whole worldview.
It's about understanding the story through their eyes, not ours.
It makes you think, doesn't it? What stories do we tell today that reflect our anxieties? What do our modern mysteries say about us?
It's a question worth pondering. The Green Children of Woolpit might be a mystery from the past, but their story still resonates today, you know? It speaks to something deep within us, something we're only just beginning to understand.
And that's something we're going to explore in the final part of our deep dive. We'll be looking at the lasting impact of this story, how it's been reinterpreted and reimagined over the centuries, and what it might be telling us about ourselves here in the 21st century. But that's for next time. For now, we're going to leave you with those questions to think about. What are your own anxieties? What mysteries are you trying to solve? We'll be back soon to wrap up our exploration of the Green Children of Woolpit. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the Green Children of Woolpit. We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? Historical accounts, those crazy theories, even how their appearance might have freaked out people back in the 12th century.
It's amazing how a story from so long ago can still make us think, make us question what we think we know.
Yeah, it's like those kids, even though we don't know exactly who they were or where they came from, they've left this mark on our imagination. And it's not just a historical thing either. This story's been popping up in all sorts of places, right?
Absolutely. The Green Children have become part of folklore, you know? They're in poems, plays, novels, even operas. And every time someone retells the story, it changes a little bit, takes on new meanings. It reflects the time it's told in, the things people are thinking about.
It's like the story itself is evolving, growing, adding new layers. It's almost like a living thing.
That's a great way to put it. It's like those layers of sediment you find on an old artifact, you know? They can make it hard to see the original, but they also tell a story. They show how people have interacted with it over time. And with the Green Children, I think those layers tell us something about how we as humans deal with things we don't understand.
So why do you think this story, even though we don't have a clear answer, why does it still fascinate people after all this time? What is it about the Green Children that just grabs us?
I think it's because they represent the unknown, the mysterious. That's something humans have always been drawn to, haven't we? We want to understand the world, figure things out. But sometimes the most interesting things are the things we can't figure out.
They're like the ultimate other, right? Something completely outside our experience. They make us question what we think is possible.
Exactly. And maybe that's the point. Maybe it's not about finding the answer, but about being okay with not knowing.
Yeah.
About accepting that there are things out there beyond our understanding.
Maybe the most important thing is to keep asking the questions, keep exploring, keep that sense of wonder alive.
That's a good way to put it. The Green Children, they remind us that the world is a big, strange place full of mysteries. And that's something to be celebrated, not feared.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of the Green Children, what have we learned? Maybe not a definitive answer to the mystery, but something more important, I think. Something about ourselves, about our relationship with the unknown.
I agree. It's about the journey, not the destination. It's about embracing the questions, even when they don't have easy answers.
So to everyone listening, keep that in mind. What mysteries do you carry with you? What stories shape your understanding of the world? Keep asking those questions. Keep exploring. Keep that sense of wonder alive. That's what makes life interesting, right? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Green Children of Woolpit. Until next time, happy exploring.